to see in their films. And so that's what we were arguing on our side. But we needed money in order to go fight that battle and try to prove that out in court. And so we went to our crowd of customers and we said, would you fund us taking this to the Supreme Court? And it was within, gosh, I think it was within like 3 or 4 days. I can remember. It was less than a week that we raised something along the lines of $7 or $8 million from the crowd in order to be able to fight this lawsuit. And when that happened, I kind of had this idea, and I messaged my brothers, and I said, "Man, if we could do this from the crowd in order to, kind of push this forward in the legal system, people are clearly like craving better content in their homes. So couldn't we use the same crowdfunding method in order to fund a film?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea." And I didn't know that later on, that's what we were going to be using to raise the funds for The Chosen, for the first season of The Chosen. Nor did I know that eventually that was going to be the model that we would use to fund Tuttle Twins. And in both cases, we set a record for the amount of money ever raised for a film project with The Chosen, and then a record for the amount of money ever raised for a kids' TV series with Tuttle Twins. And what that approach does is the crowd is greenlighting your project, right? They're voting with their dollars what they want to see. And ultimately, that's way more powerful than a select handful of executives being able to call the shot. And we thought we were onto something great with things like Dry Bar and The Chosen and Tuttle Twins, but it's so much more validating when people are willing to put forth their own money in order to fund something that they want to see come into existence. So yeah, that's fundamentally what it is. It's like, rather than a top-down approach, it's bottom up, and it's really, I think it's a much better predictor of the success, the potential success of the property, of the series or of the film, when you're getting that from the crowd than when you're getting that from some person in an armchair somewhere saying, I think that's smart, let's go do that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100% it makes sense. And it's actually what I'm hearing is centralization versus decentralization.
Yes, very much. It is that concept. There's a book called The Wisdom of Crowds, right? And in the book, The Wisdom of Crowds, it talks about, I believe it's a fair, where they go and they put a cow out for people to come in and guess how much the cow weighs. And when you have an expert come in and try to guess the weight of the cow, they might come sort of close-ish or whatever. But when you have everybody come in and it's literally hundreds of people coming in and guessing the weight of the cow, it's going to be all over the place, right? Some people be like, this cow weighs 5,000 pounds. Some other people, I don't know, 500, 200. Some the guesses are all over. But when you actually take those numbers in the aggregate, it comes way closer to the actual weight of the cow than any expert just eyeballing it. And so that's a little bit the principle of, like you said, the centralization versus the decentralization, that there is this wisdom in the collective that kind of evens things out much more than someone who has just, gotten themselves into a position where they think they are the authority figure now to call the shot.
Right. Yeah, and this is actually quite an amazing historical event, is thinking that a lot of freedom or economics are based off of a couple centralized authority figures. So I believe that we are in the time now where we get to challenge that in a really meaningful way and cultivate a more decentralized approach for the people, by the people, with the people.
Yes.
And to look after one another. I think this is more of a community development, and we get to choose to step into those identities as a team, as a brotherhood and sisterhoods, as a family. And this is what I'm really excited to go deeper with you, brother, because I feel that from my experience, I've been challenged a lot in terms of really raising or expressing oneself because it challenges a status quo. And so I get really excited to be around true creators that are making things happen and are bringing a voice for those that don't have any.
Yeah.
And I think that you guys have done a really exceptional job in multiple different ways to really emphasize freedom. And maybe let's just start with freedom. Like we talk about the golden rule, or you actually spent some time, emphasizing that. This is something that's it's. I mean, it's not a new concept, but it's to some it's like it's unheard of, is like do unto others as you would like to have done unto yourself. So maybe why is the golden rule so important to emphasizing that principle of freedom in all the work that you and your brothers are cultivating?
Well, for me personally, it all starts with Jesus. I'm a Christian. And so he taught that principle better than I think anybody, of doing unto others as you would have them do unto yourself. And we rarely go in our day-to-day lives too often, because systems get so big and we get into these big collective sort of things in our communities and in our nations and in our states, that we sort of lose track of that concept. And I think it's unwise to do so. I actually think it's much wiser to always think critically of, wait a minute, if I'm going to do this and it's going to force this person to do this thing, or then would I want that if I was in their shoes? And obviously the question is very often no. And um, I mean, we have an episode of Tuttle Twins that actually covers this. This is the second episode of season 1, where it talks about the principle of, in terms of like blowback, of when you have a nation go in and force itself on another nation and kind of try to instill its own values and do those kinds of things, that there's a little bit of a blowback that comes from the people being resistant to that, right? Like we didn't consent to this. We didn't want this to happen. We didn't want you to come in and force this on us. We would like to choose into that, right? The primary principle behind the golden rule is, at the end of the day, consent, right? And people, I think, understand that very instinctively when it comes to things like our bodies, and when it comes to things like marriage and the formation of relationships. But then they sometimes lose track of that idea of consent when it comes to things like property and your time and those types of things. So the golden rule, I just think, is a fantastic sort of yardstick or principle upon which society should be based as a whole, right? From the smallest level, families, to the larger level, communities, states, federal governments, all of it. Like, if we're losing track of that, it's never going to go that well, right? At the end of the day, that freedom for people to make choices on their own, rather than on an individual basis, rather than so much being centralized, is core to, I think, civil societies as a whole. And anytime that we're getting into the sort of manipulation and force of putting my will on somebody else's, and going beyond the protection of our rights, then I think that's when people get really upset, right? I believe fundamentally that, right or left, everyone loves freedom. Like, everyone loves the principles of freedom. They just don't always know what that looks like in practice. And so much of the critical thinking of how that's applied really does come down to that core principle of the golden.
I love it because ultimately, at the end of the day, faith is everything, and having that core devotion to something greater than ourselves is why we're here. And if we start to build that relationship within ourselves, We'll start to ultimately understand that relationship with something greater than ourselves. And then as a result, we'll see that in one another. And so that reverence or that sacred space in between us will start to create even more harmony and presence so that we're truly listening and observing one another's gifts. Because ultimately, I believe that we all can learn from each other if we're listening. We're not stuck in the head being dead. We're actually present to our feelings and our emotions. And so it's like, how can we recognize that for thousands of years, there's been this pattern that continues to repeat itself? And like Tony Robbins, my first teacher, he's always said, like there's three ways. It's like pattern recognition, pattern utilization, and then pattern creation. So fundamentally, if we are recognizing these patterns as a whole, integrating and recognizing that, hold on, there's something wrong here. There's something that doesn't make sense. How can we utilize our economics, and otherwise known as the study of human interaction or integration or action, to then create new patterns fundamentally? And what I'm hearing, brother, and I just love it because I'm really listening and I'm really curious, is for so many generations in the past, we've been repeating this pattern.
Yes.
And it's time for us, I believe, as brothers, that are coming here in unity, and really others that are around us, and really to step up to this capacity of creating new patterns for our children, our future generations, and say, like, we're not interested in this centralized authority anymore of the old way of doing things. We're very interested in doing things together as a community and benefit of our children's and one another. And so ultimately, this is abundance.
Yes.
Ultimately, this is like centralization, from my hallucination, is very much a scarce tactic. It's creating scarcity, it's creating fear, it's creating, and when we decentralize things, we create a very much an abundant, economic, prosperous, which creates ultimately peace and reverence and recognizing each other's gifts. So now moving into Tuttle twins and how you're integrating that wisdom, because I think that there's magic there for the next generations, and how you're really emphasizing economics, getting children to be curious, and even recognizing that, us as big kids can watch this and learn something new. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like in terms of now? Because I know it was Connor Boysack that really wrote the book. But sorry, am I pronouncing his last name?
Yeah.
Boyack. My apologies. My apologies, Connor, when you're listening back. But so he's now co-executive producer. He's very much involved in the creation process alongside you. Yep. And so now, how are you recognizing, because you guys have been at it for quite some time, how are you recognizing the feeling of community, of family, coming to show up in this type of recognizing the economics, so that our future generations are recognizing that their actions are able to create a new pattern for the next generation?
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to try to unpack that a little bit by little bit. So to me, it really does start with Connor's genius, right? He has kids. He has two kids. And once they start getting old enough that they're reading and getting curious, and he's trying to teach them about these principles of freedom, he goes online, does an Amazon search for books that will do that job. Kids' books to teach about fundamental principles of economics and freedom. Comes up really shorthanded, and he says to himself, okay, it doesn't exist. Okay, maybe I should just create it. Like, I want this. And it's more trying to solve his own problem for him and his kids and the next generation of his family. And then and in turn, that ends up being a solution that a whole bunch of other parents want as well, right? So he goes and he writes the first book called The Law. It's based on Frederick Bastiat's The Law. And he breaks it down, the rights to life, liberty, and property, in a way that make a lot of sense for any kind of a logical mind. and he throws it up on Amazon, starts having a tremendous amount of success. I buy the first copy of the book. I'm, oh man, this is exactly what I was looking for my kids. You know, I ended up being another one of those parents that was on the lookout for that. And then he sees there's enough demand for this that now it starts to become a series, right? Writes a second book, and Tuttle Twins starts to really kind of take off as a little bit more of a series and a movement. And Connor is a really good example of that. Like, am I going to wait around for someone to change things, or am I going to go and affect that change within my realm of influence? Instead, he chose to go and affect it, right? Tuttle Twins really starts to sell in the tens of thousands of copies, and he starts to consider the idea of turning this into a TV show. And he had been admiring my work from afar, that we were doing in the advertising space with Harmon Brothers. We had a bunch of viral campaigns like Squatty Potty and Purple Mattress and Camp Chef and Fiber Fix and Chatbooks and Lumi and all these different giant campaigns that we had done. And and I say my other business partner, who was the CEO of Harmon Brothers at the time, we'd been admiring Connor's work and had been customers of his books and been reading them with our kids and seeing how that was a really effective teaching tool. And we basically came together and said, hey, what if we turned this into a TV series for you? Because I had wanted for a long time to tell my own stories. I'd been doing it for clients for years. I'd had a lot of success with it, but I always had an itching to sort of do my own film. And my business partner, Benton, comes to me. He's like, hey, what if we do this for Tuttle Twins? And I was like, well, I don't want my first film project to be a political one. that doesn't sound too great. But he was really like, I feel like we have done such a good job of sort of honing our skills in being able to educate really well and entertain at the same time. And that's exactly what this book series needs, is someone to come in and educate in a way that people have never understood it, and to entertain at the same time. And I started wrapping my head around that. And eventually it basically came down to me having sort of a moment of meditation where I kind of got this calm, and I said to myself, okay, if I don't do this, who will? And the answer was, especially in the way that I had it in my mind, I was like, no one will. Okay, so then I basically have to do it. Is what I came to myself. If I don't go and make this book series into a TV show, it's basically not going to happen. And so we approached Connor and kind of spelled out this idea of Tuttle Twins being more like a Marvel sort of brand, where, you know, Marvel has their cinematic universe, and they've got their games, and they've got their comic books, and they've got their toys, and all of them have a little bit of a different flavor, but you can all tell, you know, it's Marvel. And with Tuttle Twins, we were like, this is kind of this freedom education brand, freedom and economics education brand for kids, and it'll have a little bit of a different flavor in the book series than what it does in the TV shows. And we kind of pitched him on that, and he sort of bought into it, and he became a co-executive producer, and we went after it and chased it. And ultimately, he was making the book series that he wanted for his kids. I'm making the TV show that I want for my kids. And we've always envisioned this as a co-viewing experience. And we are seeing the fruits of that pay off in a big way, where it's about 80% of the episodes of Tuttle Twins are watched with the parents, at least the first time. Like when it gets into the third and fourth and fifth viewing, obviously, you know, that's just the 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds just going and turning it on. It's not the parents sitting down with them at that point. But we've always wanted this to be a co-viewing experience where the education was clear enough that they would be able to finally understand these things that they believed all the way along, right? Oh, this is how inflation works. Oh, this is how the golden rule is implemented. Oh, this is how to think critically about something like civil disobedience, or like central planning, or all these different economic principles that they've instinctively kind of known and believed in all their lives, but they've never been able to explain them to their kids. Now it's all of a sudden being explained to them in a way that they get it, and that where they can have a dinner table conversation with their kids. And that is really empowering. Like, we're hearing stories left and right of kids in the grocery store and saying, oh my goodness, look at the price of bread and milk. That's the inflation monster, right? And that goes back to episode 6 of season 1, for Tuttle twins, where we break down inflation in a way that they understand, oh, this is coming from an overproduction of a currency that doesn't have any backing in reality, right? Besides the force of government. And that kids are understanding that for the first time, and they're starting to ask for their they're starting to ask for to be paid for their chores in things like Bitcoin and gold and that kind of stuff, instead of relying on fiat currency. That or they're watching the episodes on entrepreneurship, and now they're going out and starting their own lemonade stands or their own little cleaning businesses or lawn mowing businesses or grass cutting, however you say it from your part of the world. But anyway, it's that stuff is really encouraging to watch, the conversations that are happening in families around the dinner table, the co-viewing that's happening, the understanding that's sinking in. And at the end of the day, it really is about stepping up and being the change that you want to see in the world, right? First and foremost, that's what this series really is about. Is we're asking for them to think differently, to go out and affect their community for good. And we always, whenever we have moments where we're talking about, well, that's not the government's place to do that. They can't go in and take this away from you, at least not in terms of rights. They don't have the rights to do that. We also are always providing an example in the show of a call to action towards the voluntary nature of giving, of that you go out and you help your community, you help your neighbor, you seek out the less fortunate and you lift them up. Again, that abundance mindset that you talked about, that can only happen in an environment of freedom, in voluntarism. When the force is applied, it ruins the whole structure, right? That community element really comes down to those voluntary connections that we have.
I love that you bring the voluntary component into it, because it's such an important part where we get to choose. Like, we actually can be extremely abundant and free if we choose, right? Yes. It's about getting away from the mindset of the scarce mentality that we've been enslaved. Most people have been enslaved to, based off of the central planning, based off of the inflation, based off of the currency. And so I'd love to go a little bit deeper into kind of the fundamentals of, like, where are you recognizing in terms of the central planning, the inflation, and how that decentralized economy like Bitcoin, is able to identify and support us all as a collective, so that we can actually help our children understand the emphasis of sound money, just like the sound of freedom, sound money, so I really would love to bring that together with you, brother, because I know that it's something that you've been working on for quite some time, but also getting a clear awareness that because there's people out there that they don't know what they don't know, and I'm fully aware of that, and I know that you are as well. And they can hear the volatility of maybe the currencies, or the inflation, and say, oh, that's just the way it's been, or it's always going to be,
or it's corporate greed or whatever, right?
Right. So I'd love to get your take on it, if you don't mind, bro.
Yeah, I think where vehicles like Bitcoin or gold come in is they provide sort of an escape hatch from the system, right? So the government is going to do what the government is going to do. And what I mean by that is almost every government in the world is on a path to inflation or hyperinflation of some kind. So there's never been a fiat currency, meaning a currency that's not backed by something physical or of intrinsic value. There's never been an example of a currency in the history of the world that hasn't run away from itself, that hasn't essentially self-destructed as a currency over time and had to be replaced. So a good example of this is any time that governments have gone through a reset process of their currency, where essentially their currency has been destroyed, where people seeing it's lost all its value, they're going anywhere else they can to either the bartering kind of thing, or trying to use foreign currencies, something that just feels more stable in their life. When a government comes in and says, no, this is the new currency, it always comes in with a backing in something real. Like they're either backing it with gold or silver. They've never actually, at least to my knowledge, they've never actually come in and just said, oh, this old money is now bad, but this new money is now good, and this is the reset. They actually have to come in with something sound behind it to get that process started, and then later they end up separating the paper money, paper and digital money, from the actual the soundness that it was based on. But you can't just get people to accept paper and say, oh, trust it this time, this is fine, right? And so a way for people to be able to sort of protect themselves is to just opt out of the system as much as you can. Bitcoin is one of those areas where you can start to opt out, meaning just putting a portion of everything you make, even if it's small, just getting started somewhere, something into Bitcoin or into something like gold. Both of those, and I probably personally see, I'm not going to be able to predict anything. I'm not a financial guy. I probably am seeing a little bit more upside on the Bitcoin side of things right now than I am in gold, but I'm seeing a lot more upside in gold than I am in dollars, right? In any kind of a fiat currency, because even if it's not, going to go up as exponentially as some other things, at least it will hold its value, which is the problem with the dollar right now, right? When you get into that, like you said, that scarcity mindset of your money, then it makes you spend differently. Instead, you're making short-term decisions instead of long-term decisions. Long-term thinking is so much better for communities, because then you can invest into things like infrastructure, in the arts. You can invest in, invest into your community more, rather than always having to spend the money because, it's dissolving out from underneath you, because they're ruining it through constantly printing and constantly spending. And I think that has been really helpful. In our Bitcoin episode that we did in season 2, we had some comments of people saying, wow, I think you explained Bitcoin better in 20 minutes than it's taken me 7 years to explain to my wife. We've seen those kind of comments, and we've seen a lot of kids asking for their money in Bitcoin. And I actually started a small fund for each of my kids individually, where I allowed them to buy some Bitcoin. I got a wallet. I purchased some Bitcoin for them, both of their savings and their spending money. And that's doing really well. We did that years back. That's done really well for them. Whenever they decide to cash that out, that's going to be in a really good spot. And so I'm a big believer in the ability to voluntarily opt out of the system, and that being a better transition than waiting for some sort of a big reset that could, even violate our freedoms further down the road.
Yeah, I love what you just emphasized, actually, the importance of the energy transition. And so we're in this time and space right now where the transition of energy is really coming from this centralized component, where I love you brought up the effect of change inside of the Tuttle twins and really emphasizing life, liberty, and property. And so by emphasizing those 3 tools of like really sound economic principles, which also can be known as Austrian economics by those that may not be aware, but I wanted to like go deeper into that, if you don't mind. And by the way, I just wanted to touch on it, because I wrote down here how you sort of educate and entertain. And I also add a third one, is like, how can we empower with that emphasis, right?
Yeah.
And so I believe that by bringing this life, liberty, and property together, by affecting the change inside of economic human action, we can cultivate that decentralized space using our economics of action. And also then at some point it's receiving the Bitcoin. And so although I know that's not yet the space that we're in, because the medium of exchange has not become, or Bitcoin has not become a medium of exchange, more of a store of value still.
Yeah.
However,
it's a reserve, right?
right. So with that energy transition and what's available to us all on a global level, you know, like Saifedean Ammous, he wrote that book, Principles of Economics and Bitcoin Standard and things like this.
Right.
And
Right.
I
Same
can't
thing's great.
wait because he's going to come on the show as well. But what I
You
really
should.
want to emphasize is that inside of that, there is he brings a pretty beautiful example where he talks about the resources that are available on this planet. If we put them all into the Olympic-sized swimming pool, we are right now currently utilizing and using half a cup of that.
Mm.
And so we've always been conditioned to believe that there's so much limits or limitations on a global standard.
Hmm.
And my hallucination is that our predecessors, because they were constantly told that there's only limitations and limits, and they weren't listening to some of the great prophets like Jesus or Muhammad or others that have walked this
Hmm.
beautiful earth. They weren't paying attention to the abundance mindset of being able to cultivate that and unify. Is that it be needed? There became this need, this desire, this holding on or this grasping of and wanting to control and create more fear in war and scarce and going into, like you said, these nations to colonize and like to take over versus getting curious and saying, hey,
Right.
what do you need? What do you need? So and it comes down to what you guys are communicating so beautifully of life, liberty, and property.
Hmm.
So do you see by us as a team, as a collective, as a society, bringing together an economic prosperity that can create this abundance and peace on a global scale so that nations are able to take care of each other or people are able to like unify more? Is this a possible vehicle? Because you guys are communicating that on, in your ways with Tuttle Twins
Hmm.
or the curiosity, but can Bitcoin be a vehicle that brings us more into unity versus separate us?
I believe so. That's like, I believe fundamentally that the principles of freedom, um, and of economics applied on a voluntary basis are are going to do more for the hope of the world, than almost anything else. And it's really encouraging because right now we've got really stark examples on the internet of things that are being where we're incentivized in our behavior to the worst of our nature. So let me bring up an example, right? TikTok and the TikTokification of the internet, right? TikTok had its tremendous success, and then that TikTokification has now gone to almost every platform, right? Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and so on. That immediate scrolling. So what that means is when I'm scrolling the internet, I have the me that I'm aspiring to be, like my better self that I'm aspiring to be, and I might thumb up something based on what more of what I want. But the platform is actually going to mostly ignore what I thumb up, and instead it's going to pay attention only to what I watched the longest. Now, what I watched the longest might be a really great dopamine hit in that very moment, but it isn't necessarily uplifting me and helping contribute to a better me over time. And so what the platform continues to feed me is whatever my base nature is of how I'm interacting on that sort of just watching level, as opposed to what I'm asking it to do. Because what I might be asking is, and consciously saying is, I want it to do more of this good stuff. Give me more of this stuff that feels like abundance and good education, and it's going to drive towards success. But it might be just being like, well, here's more really brain rotting cat videos or whatever it is. Like it might be just feeding me more because I'm not even thinking and I'm just sitting there scrolling, right? And so that's a system that is reinforcing, in many cases, worse behavior. And I think it's making the world worse. And it's rewarding really a lot of contention and a lot of divisiveness in the comment sections, right? It's rewarding that. It's rewarding that bad behavior on the community level, not just on the individual level. And on the opposite, and then when you have a currency like the dollar, a fiat currency with no sound backing behind it, that is rewarding that short-term thinking of like, oh, just it's all based on interest rates and all these kinds of things of like, oh, I'm not going to think long term. I'm not going to invest in the future into my kids into the next generation or whatever. It's all about now, what you can consume now and moving on and making the quick buck and doing that kind of thing, as opposed to a more patient and peaceful process of building success and wealth. Bitcoin is kind of a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel in and of itself, of incentivizing honesty, incentivizing long-term thinking, incentivizing more voluntary economic interaction as opposed to forced economic interaction. Those kinds of systems come into place where it plays to the better part of our nature and rewards the better part of our nature, and of our free will to choose something better. That is exciting, right? That is the future that I think we have to look forward to. That even if we don't see it happen on, even if we don't see it happen like with the majority of people and communities and countries, there's a lot of hope and a lot to look forward to as long as it can exist in strong pockets. And that's where I think that can happen. I think we will constantly see the bad out there get worse, but we'll see the good get a lot stronger right along with it and be able to be resilient when things get really bad, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I believe that that's the resilience that we've come in this time and space to really magnify as a whole, because meaning the ones that are willing to step into it. It's a choice, right? Like it's not like everyone. I believe, there's such power in seeing, wow, I really don't want that, but that means that I really want that. Like there's such gift in that dichotomy and being able to see the light in the dark, and in whichever way that is, or the right and the wrong being in from the objective. Like maybe there isn't a real right and wrong, but there is a right and wrong for you or for me, and whatever that is, it's based off of that internal compass that we all, like I said before we got on, it's the principles that guide us will be the ones that define us. And so ultimately, the way we choose to live our life is our altar, and each moment is our prayer. So, it gives us this gift of choosing consciously to say, hey, I am going to commit my life, my energy, my economics, my integration of my actions to be fundamentally for something greater than myself. And how we choose to do that, it's totally up to the individual. Yeah. And then I believe too that that's what gets to bring us even closer together or further apart. And that becomes, what did Nicola call it? If you want to learn the secrets of the universe, pay attention to energy, frequency, and vibration.
Yeah.
And there's magic there. There's so much magic there. So I really honor, your insight about it, because there is a way that, and the fact that in season 2, do you know which episode it was for Tuttle Twins? I know it's off the top of your head, but like,
for the Bitcoin, for the Bitcoin one. Yeah. Gosh, did we do it on? I don't remember now. Was it 4 or 6? I can't remember.
Nice, cool. I'll have to definitely go check it out.
Yeah, I think it's either 4 or 6 of season. Gosh, I can't remember my episode numbers as well. We're now in the full-on production of season 3, and so I'm losing track. So I apologize. I don't know off the top of my head.
No, nothing to apologize, brother. So now, based off of you and you're really planting a lot of seeds, and so it's beautiful, because you're like, at the beginning you said, we're farmers, and so you're farming in a different way. You're just planting a lot of seeds, with the language, with the curation of Tuttle Twins, with Harmon Brothers, what you guys, Angel Studios, you're planting seeds for the future. And so, what are some of the seeds that you're planting in terms of putting your energy out there, your frequency, your vibrations, to help others discover the secrets of, their universe, their own personal universe?
Yeah, I mean, Tuttle Twins for me is the first and foremost. It's never been about, I mean, at the end of the day, people call it a political show. I really think it's a freedom and economic show, but it's fine if you want to call it politics. But it's never been about winning the next election cycle.
Yeah.
I think people that are shaping the world towards the scarcity and towards the coercion and the force have been playing the long game on it for a long time and been doing it very well. And I
Yeah.
think those that have been more freedom minded and have more of that abundance mentality have actually been playing way too much of the short game. This is all about the long game. This is all about educating a new base and inspiring that many more, I mean, the best thing that would come of this is if there's a whole bunch of different projects like Tuttle Twins, that both the series and the TV show that are created later on that are in competition with this. That'd be fantastic if there's more of that kind of content created in the future. I mean, it's great if we can get people to vote more in the direction of our freedoms and our rights, and do that here in 10 to 15 years when they grow from kids into voting citizens. But even better if we can affect the kind of change where they're taking responsibility within their own families and their own communities to provide something better than what they've seen. That's the ultimate goal, long term. So for me, yeah, Tuttle Twins has always been about the long term play, and it's had to be because I'm 4 or 5 years into this project now, and it's been a major sort of career focus change from the day-to-day of client services and advertising. I still consult and advise on that. But it's much more of my time is being spent on the development of the show. And it is really encouraging to see the next generation be very inspired and to give the voice of sound money and good sound economic principles and freedom, sort of a cool, fun cultural moment, if you will. Like that's really rewarding, is we're trying to make a show that kids choose to watch over their options on YouTube and Netflix and Disney Plus and TikTok and the like. They want to sit down and just enjoy the show because it's a fun adventure, because it's characters they relate with, because it's exciting, and at the same time they're learning things like inflation hurts a nation, or the entrepreneur makes problems fewer, or sometimes it's okay to civilly disobey, or disagree doesn't mean enemy. These kinds of principles that sort of sink in. They're little bumper sticker kind of lessons encapsulated in each episode. We try to give all those little moments there. I always think of the original Tobey Maguire Spider-Man from 20 years back. With great power comes great responsibility. That's right. Anybody can complete that for me, because there was so much great storytelling and character built around that, and that lesson in there was central to the story. And that's what we're trying to do with Tuttle Twins, is create really memorable, fun media that kids can connect with in the way that they can, like Disney characters for that matter, but taking away something that is fundamental to belief systems that we feel like are going to help the world become a better place. At the end of the day, all parents want to pass their values and their principles onto their kids. They want to do that, right? They want to at least give them the opportunity to choose that. And we're just providing a tool for them to do that. People say things like, "Oh, this is indoctrination and this is propaganda." And I guess by the strict sense of the word, yet when you propagate ideas, that is propaganda, then sure, you can you can call it that, and we are propagating ideas. Or you could call it indoctrination. Well, everything is indoctrination. You're always teaching something and coming back to principles of some kind in whatever you're doing. So this is just giving parents a tool set to better convey these ideas to their kids, and to better educate them, and to help them think critically about that and have those conversations there in their family.
The quality of our questions will determine the quality of our life. And I find that the quality of our relationships, the quality of everything that we have. And I love it because it is our responsibility or our ability to respond to ask these questions and to get curious. It's curiosity. This is why I always say is like I'm a big kid because I'm super curious. And if I'm super curious, that means that there is always something more to know or not know. Or because when you realize that you don't know anything and everybody is around that can support you, is like what Henry Ford said, I don't need to know everything. I just need to pick up the phone and ask, 50 of my closest advisors. And
Yeah.
as a result, we get to move together in a bigger, meaningful mission. And that's what cultivates, this. I love that you bring up, the disagreement component, having that thoughtful disagreement, doing it in a place of peace, being able to, step into those places of what's aligned for you, right? And in terms of responsibility, I'd love to get curious because you talk about creating content and what future content you may be or may not be looking for, but like right now with the energy companies, for example, and all the energy that's available as an abundant resource across the planet, there's a lot of stranded energy. There's a lot of stranded energy that's being either put off into the atmosphere and we're not capturing it. But there's tools, techniques, and abilities for us to capture that energy and to turn it into power, into electricity that can also then be created to, either heat or more power to put into miners to create more abundance. And it creates this infinite process of abundance.
Yes.
So so I believe that as a whole, as energy companies, as a community, we can capture this infinite abundant resource that's available to us, that has been always available to us, because we can now put the engineers together. We can put the people that have all the tools, the functions, the capacities together to capture all this so that we can create that infinite space so that there is that infinite level of exchange and an abundance available to us all. And how do you feel, capturing more of that type of information? Or is that something that you've thought about or educate about? And I'm curious to know your thoughts.
Well, I haven't read the book yet, but there is a book called Superabundance. And when you talk about capturing energy, another way to put um, another way energy is represented is with time, right? And in this book, Superabundance, and I've only listened to the podcast on it, is um, they kind of go back through history and look at the data, because there's a lot of messages going on out there right now that, like, if you are creating more humans, for example, then you are a leech on the planet, and that's a bad thing. And there's very much the scarcity mentality around procreation, around having bigger families, around like kids in general, and um, and there's a lot of fear mongering around, like you said, just the resources that this planet has to offer. Well, a lot of what they've done in the data of the book Superabundance is they've kind of taken away all the economic factors that are playing into it, like money, which goes up and down in its value based on how much they're printing it, and a number of factors there. And they've just said, how much time? So everyone has the same 24 hours in a day, right? And so how much time does someone have to work in order, for example, to have a kilo of rice, right? That would be one metric. And then they've looked at that over the space of history, and the amount of time that someone has to work to get a kilo of rice has just progressively gone down, even as our population has been doing this, right? And it's the same thing for things like rice, or or like sugar or apples, or there's all these different commodities that they can kind of tie it back to, of how much of your time, how much of your ultimate resource of 24 hours a day do you have to devote in order to procure, in order to get um, a measure of these staples. they're showing, no, it doesn't matter that the population is going like this. It's actually becoming more and more abundant, that when as the population grows, the capacity for the efficiency of the production of these things is actually going up, right? That you can spend less time and get more. And we live in a place of where there's this superabundance, because it's one thing just to say, as you add another body, of course you get more production because it's one more producing body. But no, it's not just that. It's that your time resource is actually getting more efficient, even when you take into account the population increase itself. It's like becoming, it's efficiency upon efficiency. So I think there's so much to be explored in the way of that time energy argument. And like you said, this sort of idea of like this, all the resources of the world in an Olympic sized swimming pool, and how much we've actually gone through. There is a principle of what we focus on grows, right? If we're constantly focusing on the negative, on the news that's being put out there, that the world is coming to an end, that there's never going to be enough to take care of everybody. Well, there already is enough to take care of everybody. It's just the problems that we're needing to solving is more around the transfer of those things, right? The getting the resources to the right places, as opposed to whether or not they exist. And if you allow people to get into the voluntary mode of interaction, and rather than the coerced side of things, then you're going to get there a whole lot faster than if you're trying to centrally plan it and say, this is the way it's going to go.
Letting go, surrendering, not having,
yes, surrender.
Control. It's like, it's this mind construct where we're thinking that we're in control, recognizing that, hey, that's the ego self thinking about only itself, right?
Yes.
Versus the actual paradigm of, hold on a second, like let's allow everything to come out, and it just goes through us. It comes through, it funnels through, and we just become the vessel, the vehicle, just this like beautiful part of it all.
Yes.
So I love that, brother.
I love the analogy. So I'm in Utah, and I live next to Salt Lake City, right? And it's one of a few lakes in the world that doesn't have an outlet, right? So all the water that goes into it, it captures and it holds onto. And Salt Lake City is full of salt, and it's mostly dead. There's almost nothing that lives in there. And it's very similar to the Dead Sea, right? Over in the Middle East. And again, this is a lake that has no outlet, right? It doesn't allow things to flow through. It just captures it all. And it's things don't grow there that are, it's not great. But then if you take these other lakes that have these outlets and allow things to surrender and flow through, there's much more. The life that builds around it is way more vibrant, right? There's all these different fish species, all this great little ecosystem around it, and all this abundance that comes from there. But when it's just capturing and never letting it go, it just becomes dead, right? And there's a little bit of a parallel in life for us in just seeing how nature works, and gives us an example of that.
The first principles.
Yep.
Nature's law, and I think that this is something that really brings us back to time and energy. We have a very limited amount of physical time. We might as well use it with absolute abundance, and recognize that we can actually capture all this energy so that we can utilize it for our children's children. I'd love to I'm curious, have you seen the documentary by Alana Medvilla called Dirty Coin? It talks about the time and energy of how this all comes together. She's a really great friend. With your permission, I'd love to connect you guys.
I'd love that. That'd be great.
She really took a lot of time, traveled around the planet, put together a screening. I'll get you even a screener if it's okay with you. To observe the screener for her documentary, because I'll introduce you guys first, and then I'll invite her to send you the screener, because it really she's really been able to capture the essence of how to capture that all. And maybe there's something that can be co-created there, brother, for a bigger, more meaningful meaning. something that really comes to mind and heart because it's for the greater alignment that we're talking about. If that's okay with you, bro.
Great. I love that. Yeah. Um, yeah, like I mean, like you said earlier, at the end of the day, like as we go through this life, one of the biggest lessons we have to learn is the more we seek to sort of aggrandize ourselves and reward ourselves as opposed to going outward and blessing others, like the less happy we become. It's again more of that dead end. But if you are actually looking to bless others' lives and uplift as you go, then you forget yourself and you end up finding yourself, right? So that's what the principles there too.
I love it because you're in the like this. It comes from really being planting seed. Like you are a farmer. Like it's by being in the land, by being in the nature that these are like fundamental principles, brother. And I noticed this from learning and spending time with my grandmother. Like she's totally all the time in the garden,
Mm-hmm.
since I was a little kid. But she in Poland when she lived in Poland, she's always been, in the garden. And then when I spent time in Brazil with the indigenous, it was always about taking care of what's around us, the land, the people, the presence. And it's amazing to discover and hear this being articulated so beautifully from you and having this responsibility that you're walking the talk, bro. You're not just talking. You know what I mean? It's amazing.
And I'm literally walking because I'm on the treadmill.
So as you go through, you have how many kids now?
So we have 7, one in heaven.
Big love, brother.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we had a stillborn at the very beginning of COVID, so we miss her, but we'll get to see her again.
I honor you for your vulnerability and thank you just for being so real and authentic, bro. It means a lot to me. I know it's not easy. Anything to be like totally. I mean, I imagine it's not easy because I've never had a stillborn. So, however, I don't even have kids yet. I can't wait to be a father and meet somebody amazing. However, I just really honor and I can imagine the feeling. So, thank you just for being so pure and real, bro. It means so much. I'd love to know as devote your time to the children, to being this amazing dad that you are, and brother and son and things like this. How has those family values been, lifting you up as a man every day that you get to like show up with your business, show up with your mission, show up with your family, with your wife, because that's a huge purpose, right? Like Tony
Yeah,
always says, our purpose is what's right in front of us in that moment, right? Like, so
yeah.
I find that you have so many purposes. It's so beautiful to observe. So like, how has that been able to duplicate in every area of your life?
Well, there's the great leader once said that no success in life can compensate for failure in the home, and that is something I'm learning firsthand. I've definitely had sprints of my life where I have admittedly spent too much time and focus at the office and on working on providing on that aspect. But as a father, that's only one of my responsibilities. And another one is to really be present and be with my kids and hopefully show them, like you said, we learn so much from observing, and so they need to be able to we need to provide meaningful interactions where they can observe, hopefully me being as good as I can be. And I have gotten a lot more involved over the years, and I think I'm doing a better job with my latter kids than I did with my older. But I mean, you just try, right? You do the best you can. And I have a little, because we grew up so poor, I have sort of that undying drive to, like, I have to succeed. I have to provide. I have to, Like that's in there, and I can't ever get rid of that, but I'm having to temper that with, okay, I need to make sure I'm home for dinner, and I need to make sure when I'm there, I'm putting my phone to the side and making my kids a priority, and then I'm diving into help, and that I'm, helping with their school project that they're doing, or having meaningful conversations with them. And um it's a process of learning all that, and it's also a joy, because as a father you get to experience life as a child all over again, especially for those of us that are kids already at 44 years old. It's really fun to re-experience so many of the joys of childhood with your kids, and so they're a great gift in that way, to me. And at the end of the day, when it all washes away, like, family is what you've got left, right? It's your family and your health, and those relationships that matter most. And so you have little moments where that comes into perspective more, and I'm still learning it as I go. Still learning that in the same way that you have to invest heavily into a business in order for it to succeed, you have to invest heavily in your kids, have to invest heavily in your marriage. And I'm still learning that process. And but day at a time. And I'm glad to say I'm a better dad now than I was when I started. And really do love my kids, and love to see the sort of talents and personalities and things like that they come with. And my wife has done a tremendous job of, has homeschooled them for the most part. We've done a little bit of mixed schooling, but she's done a lot of homeschooling, and she's been the primary caretaker at home. And I've really appreciated that. And she's made tremendous sacrifices for that to happen. But yeah, family's a great joy.
I love it. And hearing that is really important. I find that we can't really go out there into the world, like you said, if we don't have that foundation at home. And I can definitely emphasize this in terms of like my parents, they've been always supportive. Any decision I go out there, they're like, "You go all in," and super all in with me. And my sisters, they're always supportive. My nephews, it's always been super. My grandmother, and I imagine having that same feeling with a wife and kids is going to be even more expressive, expansive. How now, going through the whole process and building this family with your wife, how much closer have you and your beloved become through that, ups and downs? I'm sure there's these like, meaningful expressions that you get to step into, but like how much even more bonded that have you guys cultivated your relationships and your strength as the sacred union?
It's the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, right? And for sure, it's been when you watch your kids succeed, because you have to allow them to choose, and you have to allow them to learn. You want them to not repeat mistakes that you've made, and you want them to, or avoid the mistakes that you avoided. You want them to kind of be like you were in many cases, or better than what you were. And then kids don't always choose that path, right? Every kid is kind of on their own path, and you have to also trust that they'll find their way in life. But with my wife, that's been one of our biggest challenges, is watching our kids grow up and make their own decisions. And you do the best that you can, and you can't get too you I think sometimes as parents, when we see failures in our kids, we blame ourselves too easily. And then when they succeed, we often are like, well, I don't know where they got that from, but good for them. And it's probably neither end of the spectrum, where you say to yourselves, oh, we did such a good job, or we did such a poor job. It's just like, we did the best we could. And hopefully your kids are choosing what you'd like them to. But I think the main thing in all of that is, as we've gone through the mistakes of parenting and stuff, is we try to show our kids that we love each other. We try to continue to have to make time for our marriage a commitment. We've had date night now. We didn't start off very well with that, but we've over the past, I think, 7 years, we've been very consistent about having date night every Friday. That's been a really
I wouldn't say you're trying then. I would say you're doing. I would say you're doing, not trying.
and we especially when you have a lot of kids, the kids can really become a pull to where it can get a little bit out of balance with your marriage. But we've just just doing the best we can, trying to serve one another, trying to make things that are important to her important to me, that I want to provide those things and want to make them a priority in my life because it's a priority to her. And I think when we both do that for each other, it just goes better. It's always about going outside yourself to find the ultimate joy for yourself, right?
Daniel, you're a blessing, man. You really are. I really appreciate you and the kind words and everything that you do and you and your brothers are doing. If there's more information that people can find out about Tuttle Twins or any other projects that Harmon Brothers are doing or Angel Studios, where's the best way that they can connect or find out more information, connect with your CEOs and things like this in the projects?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as just going and looking at the projects that we have, angel.com is going to be the best starting place. Or if you want to look up Tuttle Twins, TuttleTwins.tv is going to be a great spot. And then as far as reaching out to us individually, LinkedIn, we're all on LinkedIn in some way. We're at various stages of how much we respond to direct messages on LinkedIn because there's a lot of them. And so no guarantees there, but we are on LinkedIn a fair amount. You can look us up under our individual names. Yeah, that's probably the best way to go for now. But yeah, I'd say check out the show, watch it with your kids, have some good discussions, see if you like it. And yeah, we're just having fun now creating our third season.
Cool. Brother, last question before we go. If you had 3 days left to live, what would you do?
I'd just go home and spend all 3 days with my family. I just try to have as normal of 3 days as we could, of just have, meals together, do like leisurely walks together or something like that. Just something peaceful and fun together, and just play games, spend time. I would just do it all. I would do it all with my family. I would spend all 3 days. I might spend a couple of hours of it going to a temple that's part of my worship. I might go there for a time and try to connect with God in that way. But that'd probably be my 3 days.
Bless your heart, dear friend. I'm looking forward to staying connected and really manifesting a lot more magic in this world as a team. And I really look forward to our next conversation, brother. Big love to you.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Sorry, I said Aaron. Eric.
No worries, bro.